All right, we're excited to be joined by Mike Reiss of ESPN. Mike, thanks for sitting down with us here at the Combine.
Mike, Evan, great to be with you.
Needs no introduction.
I know, needs no introduction.
Yeah.
I said it might have been like back the old blogger podcast days, the last time we had like you for a one-on-one conversation. So thank you for that back in the day. But just to start off, Mike, I know you covered Mike Vrabel for a long time as a player. What have you seen from him the first few months here as a coach?
So I feel like a lot of energy, a lot of clear vision on what he wants to do. And I think the experience stands out to me. This is someone that's done it before, knows the steps to take, and it's been sort of refreshing. Is the word that I would use.
Yeah, what was your experience like just covering him as a player? I mean, a lot of reporters have great stories about covering Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
But what was it like for you?
So let's start with where his spot was in the locker room, right? Because that's the first thing that I think about is when we would all be gathered around. So he would have been where Christian Ellis is. So for those who are listening or watching this is down close to where Teddy Bruschi used to be. That's the corner locker going into like the meeting room.
Right, where Jawan Bentley is.
Jawan Bentley in that area. So, and we would gather around, and you had to be, let's see, not sensitive when you were gathered around Mike Vrabel. You had to be ready for the quick wit, and I would say not much has changed now that we're back doing it, and he's the coach.
It's absolutely true. One of the things I was wondering with Vrabel here, obviously they have all this cap space. They had a lot of cap space last offseason. We saw how that went, trying to attract free agents to come here. In your experience knowing Mike, like, do you feel like he can be a great recruiter of some of the talent that maybe is out there and try to sway people to actually come to New England? Because let's face it, right now I think being a destination is something they're struggling with a little bit.
So I do think he can be that. And for those that are watching us, we should let them know that the last question that Mike took in our gathering after the press conference on Tuesday was Evan talking about being a recruiter. And Mike told the story. I don't know if he told it when he was on with you guys about how he was at Houston. Yeah. And Houston had some natural grass in their dome. And Mike Vrabel, who's an assistant coach, says to Bill O'Brien, what do you have this natural grass in the dome for? And Bill O'Brien goes, I think it would be great for recruiting free agents. And Vrabel says to Bill O'Brien, the only green that free agents care about is the cash. So I think the cash is, to use that story, the cash is the great recruiter, but in a tiebreaker, Mike Vrabel can be a great salesperson. And I think it's genuine, Evan. Like, I do think it's genuine.
Yeah, I think that was one of the takeaways that I had just listening to him talk. If you are looking for that tiebreaker, this is an intense guy, and this is a guy that you could see yourself as an athlete playing for, and not to say that other coaches couldn't maybe do the same thing, but there's just between him and really Drake May, like I feel like those are the two things, and money obviously that they have going for them right now. So it's been interesting to see how he can kind of talk and has that gravitas and a little bit of that just appeal from a player perspective.
And I think the other thing, if it works out in the Patriots' favor that they have going for them, is the culture that he had established in Tennessee. Yeah. So if players hear about that, and that, like, so Taylor Lewan, right? Like, I'm sure you followed him on X and his stories about that. Will Compton, right? Correct me if I slip up here. These are players that had experienced it, that are out there in the public, talking about what they got out of it, even if they might have been a little skeptical at the start, right? And so that can also be something, a player that wants to be part of that culture. How about for us? Like, I know with Mike, I better be sharp when I'm coming out. I better have my questions ready. Yeah. Like, so just as it's like hopefully raising your game as a reporter, someone covering the team, you want to raise your game as a player, like, this might be a guy you want to align with.
Yeah. Mike, we get so caught up in free agency coming up and T. Higgins and Ronnie Stanley and the big names, and then you slowly start to hear all these guys are going to re-sign, or, and then you talk about the draft and we talk about Abdul Carter. And, there's just a lot of names that you get excited about. But throwing all the names apart, what does this Patriots team need? I mean, what do they need to add personnel-wise, whether it's free agency, the draft? When you get out of this spring, What do you want to see this team pick up?
Well, I feel like the line of scrimmage would be where I would start. If you and if Ronnie Stanley comes available to me, Evan, we were talking about this. Like that would be a great one to just say, oh, bam, left tackle, squared away, taken care of. And I thought one of the things Mike said that I liked, that I agree with, the Super Bowl was won at the line of scrimmage. I think the Patriots are weak at the line of scrimmage right now, and that's where I would start.
Yeah, he mentioned too that they wanted to try to use free agency so that they can get to the draft and just take the best player available, not have to necessarily reach on a player like that. We talked a little bit about Ronnie Stanley last night and him potentially being available. I think the Ravens are obviously interested in keeping him, so we'll see where that goes. Just do you have a sense at all, though, of some of the names that might actually get to free agency that you would be interested in?
So, well, Ronnie Stanley would be at the top of my list. Milton Williams would be another. I think the thing on that is, what is the number? Right. Would it go over Christian Barmore? Should it go over Christian Barmore? That would be the next one on my list. I don't still considering Josh Sweat.
Yeah.
And if that would be a fit. To be honest, even at the lower financial level, I mean, would you consider Judon coming back?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying I would, but like just names like that that I've thought about, and pretty much almost every one is at the line of scrimmage. Another one, I like Stephon Diggs. I've always been a Diggs fan. I don't know what the financial level on that would be, but I'd consider looking into that one myself.
Yeah. What about when you look internally at this team? And Vrabel got some questions today about scheme changes and all those kind of things, but do you look at this team as it is right now? And he said it today. He said the team's going to look very different at the end of August. Do you think that there's some maneuvering to be done on the roster, that guys that are already here, guys that are under contract?
Meaning that they might not be around?
Perhaps. I mean, I think any coach comes in, he's got to adjust things, and certainly a lot of those players connect back to Bill, and you would think like tough, versatile players. Everybody's kind of in the market for those, but at the same time, Mike's got his own philosophies that he's going to come in with, and I don't think anything needs to happen immediately, but it feels like they really need to take inventory of who we have and who are the guys that we're going to move forward with.
I think so, and also how they're going to play. So you applying this conversation, one thing Mike Vrabel said that stood out to me, Terrell Williams is a very aggressive defensive coach. So when I hear that, well, the defense is going to be playing differently than it has in the past. So what does that mean for Dietrich Weiss, free agent?
Yeah.
What does that mean for Jonathan Jones? Mike Vrabel's talking about how important the nickel position is in today's game. Like,
is that Marcus Jones?
That Marcus Jones? Is it Jonathan Jones? Is it someone else? Maybe it's. I'm not saying DJ Reed would be a slot, but does that make a corner? If some of your other options in free agency that maybe are at the lines don't work out, maybe you redirect the money. So I think that's where my mind is racing, is how they'll play differently on defense. I think offensively, they just need players, no matter what the scheme is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that nickel spot is interesting because I think a lot of teams nowadays are going to more like safety body types in the nickel instead of true corners, because with all these like Shanahan-inspired offenses, you have the wide zone teams going outside the numbers and trying to run to the numbers, and if you're going to do that, like, you need to set the edge of the defense and force the ball back inside. So instead of having a guy like Jonathan Jones or Marcus Jones who's undersized and isn't really going to be able to do that, you have more like C.J. Gardner-Johnson types that can actually push the ball back inside to the defense. So when he says nickel and he starts talking about the importance of, is that guy a good blitzer? Is that guy, can he do different things? Can he cover, but can he do other things? That's sort of the thing I was thinking about a little bit was, okay, 5'8" Marcus Jones, 5'9" Jonathan Jones. Is that really what he's looking for in that spot?
Really, really good discussion.
Yeah, wonder about Marty Mapu, too. Not necessarily in that role, but just another guy who's been kind of, I don't want to say miscast, but you haven't really found a home for him yet. And he came out of nowhere last year, that first game back, played like the whole game. We're like, where's this guy been? And, tapered off a little bit. But I wonder if there's a different spot for him when we talk about maybe linebacker position, getting more mobile, when you look at what they did in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Just a lot of questions. I mean, that's for the thing with Mike. He played under Belichick here, never really coached under Belichick, worked a lot with Romeo Crennel and Dean Pease and guys off of that tree. Still kind of did his own thing in Tennessee, and I think that's like our question, which we'd asked him a little bit about it. He didn't really get into it too much, but how's it going to change? How's it going to evolve? And I think, as you said, that defense just seems like it's a piece of clay right now, and that they're going to have to mold it into something different.
And I love to take viewers and listeners inside, right? So just sort of on the same topic but different topic. One of the thoughts I came into this combine with was, will Vrabel commit to Mike Onwenu at guard or tackle? So we remember Bill Belichick. He's a guard. Like, that's where his body type is. I do think there's some people in the front office that say, Onwenu's not bad at tackle. Like, if you look at some of the PFF numbers, you know, they're sort of stack up pretty good at tackle. And I don't know if that's actually true, Evan. You might be able to confirm that. But so today, I'm like, let me take a try. You know, I mean, I'm used to this with Bill Belichick.
Right.
I mean, I know the answer is probably going to be, Mike, it's, you know, it's February.
Just trying to get the best players.
February 25th. I mean, the next time we play a game, it's September. So let's see how Mike might answer it. And that one got swatted down pretty good, right? But he did say, I had a good conversation with Mike Onwenu.
Yeah.
Seems like he wants to, you know, we can improve on some things and work on, you know, being part of this. So it was just sort of interesting, right? When we talk about how things are changing, scheme-wise, media-wise, but took a stab at that one.
Yeah, with Onwenu, I feel like the best thing for him is to play him at guard. And right now I feel like he's been a decent right tackle for what else they've had on the roster, right? And that's not necessarily what's best for him, but it might have been what was best for the Patriots in that moment in time. But every time they kind of play some of those higher-level pass rushers, he's had some issues playing outside. I remember a couple years ago, Khalil Mack just had a monster game with him playing at right tackle, one of the worst games I've seen Onwenu play as a Patriot, and I just feel like he's better suited at guard. But like all this conversations about roster, you know, brings me to the next question, which is who has final say on this roster? Because Vrabel was asked point blank who has final say today, and he kind of deflected on it, I felt like, and he didn't really give a straight answer.
Definitely. One last thing on Onwenu before answering that is my thought was, well, if he would commit to him at tackle, is Trey Smith now be, you know, you want to start getting quality starters in there. But I'm with you, Evan. I think guard. Guard would be the ideal scenario. Who has final say? So here's what I believe.
Yeah.
Contractually, like what is written on the paper, Elliott Wolf has the final say. That is what he had signed on this contract last year, is what I understand. However, Mike Vrabel, being hired as coach, comes in and is probably not going to take that job if he doesn't have assurances that he's going to have players that he doesn't want, right? And so I think there's a little bit of nuance to this, where if Elliott wanted to put his foot down and said, no, you know, we're taking this guy because I think he's the best and I don't care that you don't want him and this is the way it's going to be, I don't believe that marriage would. I don't think that's what Elliott would do, but if we're going to go by the letter of the law, Elliott would probably not be around much longer, would be my take. So I think they'll work it out. Technically it's Elliott, but I do believe it'll be significantly influenced by what Mike wants. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Last one for me, Mike, just, you know, thoughts on the draft. Here we are at the Combine, getting a look at some of these guys. I know at 4, I've said a couple times, at 3, it felt like last year pretty straightforward. We know they're probably going to take a quarterback. 4, feels like, you know, there's a couple guys, Carter, Hunter, they got through. You'd probably slam dunk them, but otherwise it gets to be kind of curious, not sure which way. Can we trade down and maximize and not overdraft anybody? And it seems like those are the conversations we're having this year.
Yeah, what I look for as a reporter, I feel like Evan's studied it a lot more than me. Mike, you probably studied it a little bit more than me, is you just look for consensus among people that have studied it. And I don't sense it outside of Carter and Hunter.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, quite honestly, is that winning that last game really hurt this franchise, just to be honest.
Yeah.
You know? And so is there a way that maybe between now and the draft, those quarterbacks start to how we view them now changes and 2 of them end up within the first 3 picks? I think would be the best scenario for the Patriots. And then you just take the other guy, Carter or Hunter.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's probably my big picture takeaway now on the draft.
Yeah, it's a tough one because, you know, I think the next 2 best prospects are probably Mason Graham and Will Campbell, but both of those guys have some flaws to their games that don't make them quite that high-level prospect. Like the name that always gets thrown around to me with defensive tackles is like Quinnen Williams when he came out. He was a surefire. This guy's gonna be like a decade-long Hall of Fame level talent in the league. And I don't think Mason Graham quite is at that level, whereas I don't think Campbell's quite at Joe Alt's level in terms of the tackle position. Before we let you go, I'm gonna put you a little bit on the spot here.
Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't asked you? Any scoops? Any Mike Reiss info that you can share with us?
Well, so good. I love this on the draft. So let's say the 2 quarterbacks don't go, within the first 3 picks, and a team wants to come up for it. I think given the whole discussion we've had, the idea of moving back and getting another one for next year, like I would probably endorse that today as a good move for the organization. So that's sort of the big picture on that. And other stuff here in terms of scoops, or not scoops, but just stuff around
anything you're hearing
around the Patriots. Trying to think. Alex Austin's one, like I want to hear about, because we saw that we're going deep, but we go deep
what
on
we
this.
do.
Jeremiah Farm signed the 2-year
Yep.
as the exclusive rights free agent, which basically was him giving up the restricted free agent year next year. I'm curious what Alex is going to do, and I think there's probably some discussion there as to how to handle that.
Yeah.
Does he just want to take this year as an exclusive rights free agent and roll it into restricted free agency, or could they somehow reach something that maybe is in the middle where he's willing to give up restricted free agency, become unrestricted a couple years from now? Because I think fairly promising player. Could be a...
Thought he came on at the end last year. I mean, a little bit of a decision to make maybe with Jonathan Jones as a free agent, and Austin can maybe play on the outside a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like we've been clamoring for size opposite Gonzalez, right? Because somebody that can actually play full-time on the perimeter, and I think he's done a nice job when given the opportunities and when healthy and all that kind of stuff. And Vrabel talked about let's not go to the draft with all these needs, and if they don't bring Austin back and they don't bring Jonathan Jones back, now all of a sudden perimeter corner is a pretty big need, and so now you have another need to fill, right? And so that's a tough one to be in. That's a good one.
And another thing that he said that I particularly liked was on SiriusXM NFL radio, he talked about last year's draft class. And I think because outside of Drake, you didn't get much from the draft class. Is that fair to say? And I think we have a tendency, or at least I do, to just write those players off. Jalen Polk, Caden Wallace, Javon Baker, Layden Robinson, probably to a lesser degree. I mean, he gave you something, but, he used the word revitalizing that draft class. And I do think there's something to that. Like, did they just draft bad players, or was there something that happened? And Vrabel talking about how he spoke to those players and said, we hear about the sophomore slump, but let's call this the freshman 15. And, and I thought that was really good, because so much, it's not, you don't just draft a player and that player's great in your system. You draft them and develop them. And so I think what he's talking about, I believe in, and I want to see how they do it.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Well, Mike Reiss, thanks for joining us, Mike.
Great to be here, guys.